Welcome back, everybody. Here is another mini lecture that focuses on the 3 dimensions of power. All right, so as was mentioned in your textbook, and as I will mention here, politics involves power because we're ultimately talking about people making decisions about who gets what, and there's inherently a power dynamic in that. And this is a useful way to think about what that power might look like. So the first dimension is really all about coercion. The second dimension is about deterrence. And the third dimension is about essentially convincing. And I'll give you some examples that will illustrate the differences between these. So let's just say that we're thinking about voting in dictatorships. And dictatorships can also be called autocracies or authoritarian regimes in essence, right? What we're really talking about are countries that have a form of government in which leaders do not come to power through free and fair elections. So what this means is elections are not free. Some people are restricted from voting in them, and elections are not fair. Some parties are prevented from participating in them. And what we know, and we'll study later on this semester, is that a lot of autocracies actually hold elections, which is super interesting and also seems super counterintuitive because we normally associate, as we live in a democracy, with elections equaling the democratic process. But in autocracies today, the vast majority of them have elections that are not free and fair. And this ultimately allows leaders to stay in power for longer. Super counterintuitive, super actually interesting how something that we associate with an essential part of democracy is being used by autocrats to maintain their hold on power, right? So back to our example, having established a little bit of context of what I mean by voting in elections in a dictatorship. Right, so this is a map with data from a data collection project called Our World in Data, which we are going to look at a lot more closely this semester. So let's break down this idea of getting people to vote in elections using the 3 dimensions of power. So coercion, right? You, as a happy dictator, have decided you want to hold elections for various reasons, right? You want to show your strength to your potential opponents. And so what you do is people may not actually want to vote for you because why would they want to go to the polls? They know what the outcome is going to be, right? But you coerce them. You make them do something that they otherwise wouldn't want to do, and that's vote for you. So you can do this through a police or military presence, right? You can do this by making voting something that people have to do before they can, for example, collect benefits that you provide to them, right? There's things that you can do to make people go out to the polls and to vote for you. Second dimension of power. Again, continuing with our example of people voting in elections in dictatorships, deterrence would be preventing someone from doing something that they want to do. So maybe you have decided that you want to stage a protest and or to boycott elections, for example, right? You just do not want this dictator to continue to force you to go to the polls, so you want to get out there and organize people and you want to protest. Well, the second dimension of power would basically be the dictator deciding, no, you cannot protest. I'm going to stop you from doing something that you want to do. And then the final dimension of power is the third one. This is where you convince people that essentially your ideas are the best and they should willingly follow them without you having to coerce them or to deter them, right? And this is where political ideologies fit in, which we are going to get to in just a couple of weeks, but this is something that actually all dictators would prefer to do. They would prefer that people just comply with their hold on power and them continuing to stay in power because it's a lot easier if people just support you, right? You don't have to make them go to the polls. You don't have to stop them from voting. They just like what you're selling, basically, right? And that's why A lot of dictatorships have political ideologies, basically kind of formal views on the world and what it should look like, as a way to try to convince people that their form of government is the best one. So there's a picture here of obviously a book of the Communist Party of China. This is a really interesting article that just came out in The Atlantic at the end of August that talks about the extent to which the current government in China under Xi Jinping is really trying to convince people that they should still be in charge, right? So you should be able to read this article that's linked here. I gifted it all for you. It's a really, really interesting read. All right, another example, just to kind of bring it home to something that might be a little bit more familiar to us. I don't know how many of y'all played a musical instrument when you were a kid. I played the violin. I actually wanted to play the flute, but I ended up playing the violin. So that is a dimension of power right there in practice. But let's just say, right, that you don't want to play a musical instrument, but your parents are telling you that you have to, right? So they might compel you by forcing you to practice every night at a specific time. They might try to deter you from going to a friend's house or playing a sport so that you can practice your instrument. And ultimately, also something that parents would probably prefer, you just kind of drink the Kool-Aid and decide that playing an instrument is actually fabulous and you really like it. And some of you may actually love playing an instrument, right? It's not necessarily drinking the Kool-Aid. It can be a fabulous experience. But you basically buy what your parents are telling you and you decide to practice on your own. So those are the 3 dimensions of power in action.